Helldivers, the new cutting-edge warbond is here, and that means it's time to check out another new weapon. Our mission is to find the best weapons in the game, but are these weapons in the new warbond really cutting-edge, or are they just gimmicky offerings with no real combat value? My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're checking out the ARC-12 Blitzer. Let's kick this thing off with some basics. The ARC-12 Blitzer is, you guessed it, another shotgun. And just like the SG-8P Punisher Plasma that we talked about as part of this warbond, the Blitzer is a pretty unique weapon that fires a wide burst of high voltage electricity. At face value, it sounds awesome, especially with the recent popularity of the arc thrower quickly becoming a support weapon players are choosing more and more often. You might be wondering then, can the ARC-12 Blitzer replace the arc thrower, freeing up a slot for a different support weapon? Sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll get there. To unlock the ARC-12 Blitzer, you'll need to first unlock the Cutting Edge Warbond, which costs 1,000 super credits. If you've been doing your missions and buying the super credits from the Helldivers Mobilized Warbond, you should have enough, but if not, you will have to make up the difference by buying super credits at the in-game store or get back to farming. The ARC-12 Blitzer can be found on the third page of the Warbond and picked up for 80 medals. As far as the Cutting Edge Warbond is concerned, this is the most costly item out there and will require a bit of farming to get enough medals to purchase the weapon. Luckily, with personal orders now working as intended, it's easier to scoop up medals than before. So let's break this down. The ARC-12 Blitzer has a base damage of 250, infinite capacity, a recoil of 60, and a fire rate of 30. Usually when you look at guns on paper, it doesn't tell you much about their performance, but in the case of the Blitzer, I think we can infer quite a bit, and that actually plays out in the gameplay. The most notable thing is the capacity, which we'll talk about here in just a second. First, let's look at that 250 damage because it is an interesting number. Unlike most shotguns in Helldivers 2, the ARC-12 has a really short effective range, and you'll want to dance just on the edge of it for a very specific reason. When firing, a web of electric tendrils will shoot out. Each tendril can deal the full 250 damage, but each tendril cannot arc to another target after. If you're too close to enemies, that cone of lightning will fire out and just focus on a single target. But if you give the weapon more space, each tendril has the opportunity to find and hit separate targets. Truth be told, we wish this thing would arc, because while it does say it in the tooltip, it doesn't perform that way in combat. It could be a bug, but we certainly didn't see the benefit of lightning chaining to multiple enemies. What's cool about the weapon is that each tendril will attempt to prioritize the head of a target, inflicting maximum damage. This shreds light enemies in a single hit, specifically on the Terminid side. It also consistently staggers medium armored enemies, which can then be brought down with a few shots. Sadly, the Blitzer is downright useless against anything with heavy armor such as Chargers, Bile Titans, Hulks, and tanks. As far as the weapon's capacity, well, as I said, this is where you can really appreciate what the Blitzer is bringing to the table. The gun has an infinite capacity, which means you never have to worry about ammunition. This is simply the best thing about the weapon and allows you to keep firing 20, 30, or 40 minutes into a mission without ever having to worry about your primary running dry. The gun's recoil is also almost a non-factor as this weapon has smart targeting. As long as you're pointing towards an enemy, the Blitzer will find its mark, and because it'll automatically target most weak points, you really don't have to account for any recoil. Where the Blitzer struggles is with its fire rate, which is, let's make no bones about it, the slowest currently in the game. There's almost a full 2 seconds between each shot that you can fire. The fact that the weapon is that slow and the arc doesn't chain between enemies is a real missed opportunity, and the reason why the gun simply can't compete against other offerings currently in the game. This could easily be rectified with a modest tweak to its performance, which would make it much more viable in the current state of Helldivers 2. Let's now look at how the ARC-12 Blitzer performs on both fronts of the war currently in the game. Like most weapons, you do have to change up your playstyle just a bit to match the challenges that each faction presents, but that's pretty standard across the board. On the Terminid front, you'll notice the Blitzer performs significantly better than on the Automaton front. If you keep your distance, again trying to stay at max range to capitalize on the weapon's spread, then you'll be able to clear out most trash mobs with great effectiveness. If you get too close to enemies, then you run into that single target issue we mentioned before. When using the Blitzer against bugs, the weapon will actually seek out their heads, which is great against things like warriors, brood commanders, and hunters. You can take the Blitzer about as far as the nursing spewers, which it can kill, but it's not exactly fast. Forget about things like the Hive Guards because it takes an absurd amount of shots to bring these enemies down. The same is true with the Bile Spewers, Chargers, and Bile Titans, which you'll just want to kill with different weapons. When fighting Terminids, the key is to constantly backpedal, keeping enemies at a distance and in that sweet spot. If you can fire the Blitzer from the hip, even better, because you'll move faster. On the automaton front, the Blitzer falls incredibly short. Again, the weapon tears through light bots with no problem, but pretty much everything else you'll encounter on this front is a problem. The issue here is that the weapon doesn't prioritize the weak spot like it does on the Terminid front. In fact, it almost always hits bots center mass, and that's pretty useless as it takes a number of hits to take down even one of the larger enemies. For example, Berserkers take an absurd amount of hits to kill and will often swarm you before you can even address one or two in a pack. That is simply not good performance. In the same vein, Devastators take a ton of shots to kill, but you do get the added bonus of staggering them with the weapon. In theory, it's good, but the fact is you just don't want to leave yourself exposed to a Devastator, and rarely are they alone. Add on to that frustration that the weapon does virtually nothing to scout Striders. Even when approaching them from the back or the side, the smart targeting seeks out the walker's armor, which is impervious to the damage. So you see, we're talking about some serious performance issues, and we'd argue it's pretty much pointless to bring this weapon to an automaton mission. As with all weapons, there are pros and cons, and the ARC-12 Blitzer is no different. In the case of the gun, however, I think it's fair to say the cons outweigh the pros. The Blitzer excels at clearing trash mobs, while also allowing you to do chip or assist damage to medium targets, but for the most part, those enemies will require a coordinated effort or the use of a stratagem. Anything with armor, forget about it, because the Blitzer is ineffective and you'll need to address those enemies a different way entirely. Because of the gun's slow fire rate, any sort of hordes can easily overrun the player, and even when keeping the gun at its optimal distance, it's almost impossible to maintain that sweet spot for any given length of time. The gun's performance isn't great, and the lack of variability that could potentially make it better is non-existent. Sadly, it's a weapon that's cool in concept, but just doesn't have enough juice to really matter during combat. In conclusion, the ARC-12 Blitzer is shockingly mid. It's okay for Terminids, and we had a decent enough time using it, but on the bot side, forget about it. With a bit of tuning, or even some different capabilities with alternate fire modes, I could see the Blitzer being viable, especially if that made it effective against medium armored enemies. But at the present, you'd be hard-pressed to want to use this weapon as a primary. If it were a niche weapon with a very clear purpose, then maybe, just maybe, it would make sense to bring it into a mission as part of a squad, but it performs poorly in almost every category. Who knows, it might be fantastic come the Illuminate, but we'll have to just wait and see. Anyways, friends, let us know what you think about the ARC-12 Blitzer after going hands-on yourself, and if it's a weapon you'll be working into your normal loadout. Of course, if you like this content and you want more Helldivers 2 videos in your feed, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. We've got more videos coming your way, so keep it right here. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.